Good day to you and yours. This is the Processing Blue podcast, and it might actually be a great day for you if you're a Dan Chisena fan who is officially back in North Carolina, where the Panthers play on Mint Street. Sorry, I looked at Alex and it was done. Just as Garen Bates once looked at Dan Chisena and called him dirty. I don't understand that nickname whatsoever. Maybe that means he does the dirty jobs on special teams. That's what we'll go with. But the Processing Blue podcast is back, after several back and forth conversations with Alex, mostly not about this podcast. We decided, you know what? You guys deserve this one. Let's talk about a 30-0 win over the Atlanta Falcons. Truly an unusual feat for the Carolina Panthers during this era of football. They made an opposing quarterback look just in all practical purposes lost. They dominated the line of scrimmage. Trevin Wallace maybe played the game of his career. Trevon Merrick was used properly. There was a lot to like about this game. But before we get into it, I just want to ask you, Alex, could you imagine if all of your luggage was Louis V? And how are you doing?
I could not imagine if all my luggage was Louis V. I appreciate you, Mike. How I'm doing? I'm just trying to get through this podcast playing mistake-free football. That's all I'm trying to do. Because if you can do that, Mike, you can win a game. And so let's win this podcast.
See, just like the Carolina Panthers, we set the bar high. Anyway, speaking of that, let's get into the offense, where I have fielded, and I'm sure you have too, about 24 questions about, hey, should you be concerned that the offense didn't look completely, tangibly awesome in a blowout win? Well, I say nay. I think they did their jobs. And what I was most encouraged by on Sunday was the opening script by Dave Canales, Brad Izek, and the Panthers offense. This is, I don't want to call them a vanilla offense, but they are a very elementary offense. If you execute and you do the right things, you are going to have success. If you don't, you're going to be figured out quick and you're going to lose. And I think for Canales and Izek, they got a little bit more creative than usual. They used a ton of motion, which then in turn collaborated with the blocking scheme by Harold Goodwin and Joe Gilbert, and I think what's really interesting about this offense is when they execute, they're gonna be in games. It's very simple there, and I know that sounds super basic. But when you can win out of the same look in multiple ways, and you can run rub routes the way Hunter Renfrow did on that 4th and short to open up space for T-Mac McMillan, when you can wham block into a gliding David Moore behind the line of scrimmage, you are going to have some trickery. You're going to get guys open. You're going to scheme guys open, and you're going to win some drives. And I thought the way they started out so clean, it led to a touchdown. The QB scamper by Bryce Young worked. I don't think that was actually a call, but I think, the scramble, it worked. And frankly, their success before that play set up the ability to find running lanes and score a touchdown there. And I thought that's what got this team off to a good start. The defense was able to exhale because they had a lead for once. And they went out there and they held the Falcons to a field goal, which was ultimately missed. And I think they were off to the races from there. To go from not having a lead in the first 2 weeks to winning a game 30-0 is wild. What was your biggest takeaway from the offense?
Yeah, I want to zero in on Bryce Young's day for a quick second. Like you said, he was fine. Good to fine. I would kind of more lead on fine. 16 of 24 for 121 yards, took 1 sack, ran twice for 8 yards. One was for a first down and one was for a touchdown. Passer rating 78.6. The thing that got me excited, if I was just excited from a perspective of, we haven't seen this yet from this guy. He had 8 total pressures per Pro Football Focus, And the big stat that was getting passed around was he negated the Falcons' blitz-heavy scheme. They blitzed 63% of the time, and he got rid of the ball in 2.46 seconds against extra pass rushers. He finished 9 of 14 for 72 yards against the blitz. When we talk about playing mistake-free football, yes, we're talking about no fumbles when you get sacked. Yes, we're talking about don't throw interceptions. But that's part of mistake-free football too. Getting the ball out of your hand quickly, recognizing blitzes, being on the same page as your center when trying to determine pass protection. Like, that all came to the fore for Bryce Young this game. That fourth down conversion that you were talking about, the one that was executed beautifully where Hunter Renfrow essentially made a pick play, or essentially set a pick on T-Mac's defender, that was like a critical part of the game in many ways. I know it was on the first drive, but that did set the tone, as you said, and set the table for the rest of the game. Like, when you can mix that execution with the way that Bryce Young managed this game, it's gonna come close to a win, if not going to be a win. And then if all these other dominoes kind of line up, the Falcons struggle on special teams, they miss this many field goals, they have these clock management issues, you're gonna have a lopsided win. And that's what happened. I'm curious to hear what you think of Bryce Young's day, but I think fine is a good way to put it.
Yeah, he was fine. He did his job. Like, I don't think, listen, it's, as I wrote in the mailbag this morning, when you are up by 10 or you're up by 23 or you're up by 30, there is no reason to open up the playbook and expose things for future weeks. That is a fact. That is elementary football. So when you're taking that lead, you just want to manage the game. And people have asked me if Bryce is a game manager. Well, are we going to give somebody a nickname after the most unusual game we've covered since being on this beat? No. I think, if you look at Jalen Hurts, right? Jalen Hurts averages roughly 25 passes per game. He averages 150 something yards per game. And yes, he's using his legs a lot, so it's not necessarily a great sample size to compare to, but when that happens, it's play calling's based on situation. Some weeks, a guy has to be a game manager. Other weeks, he's got to throw the ball 45 times, which is what Bryce Young averaged over the first 2 games of the season to come back in that stuff. And I took a mailbag question from somebody who said that the offense didn't look good compared to the second half of last season. And I think you need the very valuable context of those were either shootouts or they were desperation efforts to come back in games.
Right.
Last year, the Panthers offense during the last 9 games of the season averaged 24.1 points per game. Yes, on Sunday, they scored 23 points. So just a smidge off. And so, like, when the defense is doing its job, that's what we call complementary football, the offense really just needs to pick up first downs, however they may come, and just operate. And, you brought up their blitz-heavy opponent. Them using wham blocks to keep them honest. Like, a wham block is when I'm trying to think of an elementary way to explain this, but you probably saw tight ends come from the other side of the line of scrimmage to block on the opposite side. So essentially they were pulling, but they're tight ends. So it's more, a wham block is more to get you from off kilter, like T-boning, like in a car accident, right? Like, so you're making them think twice before coming down that lane. And then you're also kind of knocking guys off their feet and creating open lanes for the offensive line to get one-on-one matchups and blocking in the next level. Like, and then when you have David Moore coming from the side, well, he can decoy as potentially doing a wham block, but also on top of that, you have 2 guys, if you're listening to this, that are basically like passing in the night, and they can go different ways. They can create misdirection. That can create other blocking opportunities. It can create running lanes. So I thought, for as simple as the Panthers offense is, they added wrinkles to make it so that it was dynamic and you had to think firsthand, because they were using David Moore in motion behind the line of scrimmage on plays where they wouldn't wham block. When they would do wham blocks when Moore wasn't in it. Like there wasn't like a lot of trickery. It was just a matter of, hey, you're going to have to guess what they're going to do pre and post snap every single time. And I think that helped against a team that was very aggressive. Yeah. I thought it really helped in the running game. You saw, Tommy Tremble and Mitchell Evans, who I believe is starting to come into his own, by the way, after watching the film yesterday. And Jatavian Sanders, even, they all kind of stood up one of their assignments, and that opened up pathways for Cade Mays and for Chandler Zavala and Damian Lewis, who I thought had a pretty good game as a run blocker, at least better than Mays and Zavala in that regard. So we saw Chuba Hubbard kind of get going. He kind of steamrolled. And really, you're just trying to mitigate the clock. Like when you're up 10-0 at halftime and then eventually, take a 3-score lead. And I think that's what they did. And he closed.
Yeah. I wanted to get your opinion on this. So when you're looking at the snap counts of this game, a couple things stood out. The thing on offense that stood out to me was that David Moore played 56 offensive snaps. That's 97% of the offense. Whereas Hunter Renfrow only played 17 snaps. That's 29% of offensive snaps. That is down from 42 from week 1 and then 69 snaps in week 2. So I think you look at this snap count and you're like, okay, they used a lot of 2 tight end sets because Jatavian Sanders and Tommy Tremble were in the game a lot and they were in the game together a lot. But how do you account for Moore's increase in playing time? Because he wasn't getting nearly that much playing time the first 2 weeks. And you can't also just merely say Xavier Legette was out, so David Moore stepped in. Or is it that simple?
So I think Xavier Legette obviously being out, they needed a Z receiver. David Moore, Canales has said multiple times, is very good at understanding the outside receiver spots. Hunter Renfrow is almost strictly a slot receiver. So when you're playing 2 tight ends, if you're going to have an F and a Y, I mean, you're not going to have the slot receiver out there. So they also use 13 personnel a little bit too. So
yeah, they did, yeah.
That was just going to take Hunter off the field. I also think like Hunter has been fine in spacing and against zone coverage, but for the most part, he's kind of slow against man. And so I do wonder if they were just like, we're not going to motion Hunter. We're going to motion Moore a lot. He's going to be a decoy. Like they're like something in football, like people will be like the sacrificial X receiver. The guy's just there to kind of run routes and whatever. I mean, Moore wasn't sacrificial. Actually, I thought his motion ability opened up a ton of stuff for them, especially early on in the game. And I think, David Moore's a guy who is typically a backup. So if you're going to play him a bunch of snaps, there's not a lot of risk involved. I don't know what the game plan would have been. We talk about situations had they not blown them out, right? Like maybe Tremaine plays more, but you trust David Moore. You know what he's capable of doing. He's the coaching staff's guy. And I think that was kind of part of it. We've also seen David Moore step up, especially in close or important games. They could not lose this game on stupid mistakes. And David Moore does not make a lot of mistakes. You saw after Trevor Etienne fumbled the punt return, he muffed the punt. David Moore became the safe punt return to the rest of the game. I think they know when you're coming from behind, you can take risks. When you're trying to hold a lead and you're at home and you haven't won a game, you want to be able to solidify that win. And I think that's what David Moore essentially did.
Which is very fair.
But speaking of solidifying wins, how about that defense, man? What a game for Ejiro Evero, for Jonathan Cooley, for the cornerbacks, for Trevon Merrick, Trevin Wallace, the defensive front. You could go on and on. What was the biggest thing that stood out to you about today? About the defense, excuse me.
Yeah, no. One thing at the top I wanted to bring up. So the Falcons announced they fired receivers coach Ike Hilliard. And then that prompted all these comments of, oh, Bryce Young is the Carolina Reaper. Another firing after a Panthers win with Bryce Young starting. But they fired a offensive coach. If anything, this firing is credited to the defense and to this defensive scheme that Ejiro Evero has put on, because it was masterful. It was something that was completely different than the first 2 weeks of the season, maybe save parts of the Arizona game, which I thought was interesting. Mike Jackson, I saw this stat out there, which I thought was pretty cool. Mike Jackson and J.C. Horn only allowed a 40.7% completion percentage, which is tied for first across all of week 3. That, doing the math, that is 4.1 yards per target, which is not too shabby. We know this defense is good in the pass game, but that is especially good shutting down receivers like Drake London and other Falcons playmakers. I will say that a lot of the defense's like big splash plays, namely the 2 interceptions, a lot of it does fall on Michael Penix's decision making. Penix threw a pretty reckless ball and late ball into the flat that Shaw Smith-Wade just jumped and just high stepped easily into the end zone. How much of that was scheme and how much of that was just trying to force yards is one thing to consider. Upon looking at that play in the all 22, he did have a receiver open like 15 yards down the field. Maybe the pressure got to him. Whatever the case may be, not a good decision. And then the Mike Jackson interception, maybe like his receiver just kind of fell down and made it so Mike had a really easy catch that he should have probably taken to the house, though he said post-game he just wanted to let the offense score so he can have some Gatorade. So, I mean, like, I think it was a combination of things. I have one interesting thing that I thought was cool on the defensive line in the front 7. I thought Evero was pretty interesting, or pretty innovative in how he put those guys up and lined those guys up. A couple times where they got the most pressures, they had Princely Umanmielen on the left side. They had A'Shawn Robinson in the middle. And then they had Nick Scorton kind of at that 4-eye spot on the right side, just inside the right tackle's helmet. And then on the other side, they had DJ Wonnum. So they had 3 of their outside linebackers on the line of scrimmage, ready to
Lightning package.
Yeah, the lightning package that you were telling me about in the press box. And like pretty much every time that they used that package, something good happened. Now, it didn't result necessarily in sacks all the time because the Panthers didn't ultimately bring Penix down all that much. But a lot of incompletions, a lot of quick forced throws, a lot of like positive plays for this defense. And that's what you get when you have really, really dynamic guys on this defense. When you have Nick Scorton, who can play a legitimate defensive lineman as well as a speedy outside guy. When you have Trayvon Merrick, can line up as essentially a linebacker and as a safety. That dynamicism, or I don't even know if that's a word, that stuff pay dividends on Sunday. And if they can keep channeling that, it'll make for a better defense going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you hammered home the point that I kind of made out of this game. I think Trevin Merrick was used properly for the first time in the 3-week period. He was a dime linebacker. He was a nickel corner. He was a box safety. He looked improved both in the passing game and as a blitzer. You're going to sacrifice some rushing yards when you're moving a guy around like that, where you can't kind of feel out a single position, I think. And I think that helped them. I think Trevin Wallace doesn't need to be on the field every which way. Like, to me, he is a jack linebacker that you put in on first and second down, and he reads and reacts and he attacks. And then he doesn't have to overthink the passing game too much. Christian Roseboom kind of had another rough outing. He played all the snaps. I can't recall like a massive positive impact there, if I'm being honest about it. I mean, I watched the film. I watched it live. He was not good, but I also don't think he was like abysmal either. I thought the corners continue to be great. I mean, Mike Jackson's lack of regression is one of the more pleasant surprises that this team has going on, because it seemed like he played at his zenith and he is still playing at that level. JC Horn is JC Horn. I could talk about him for hours. Shaw Smith-Wade, the interception, he apparently called his number on that one. They did a check from zone coverage. read and react, intercepted the pass, got to the end zone, baller. Like, they took advantage of Penix being kind of fidgety behind the line of scrimmage and making poor decisions, and they kept piling on. And sometimes piling on doesn't mean sacks. Sometimes it means pressures that lead to really dumb decisions. I'd rather have an interception than a sack. I would rather have a turnover on downs than a sack. So I think, the sack numbers are what they are. They have one on the year through 3 games. This team has just not been good at rushing the passer the past 3 years. But they'll take that win. They'll take that dominant performance. I think they've done very well in coverage. And I think there's real tangible growth here. I think there's, you can feel like Trevin Wallace growing up in the system. You can feel Derek Brown, getting back to Derek Brown level. You brought up the lightning package. You have your 4 best rushers at the 4-eye and the 1 and or I guess the 4-eye, the 3, and then, wide 9 and the 7. Like, that's still too inside football. Sorry, without you being able to visualize it. But A'Shawn Robinson was their best interior pass rusher last year. You've got the 2 rookies out there. Scorden can rush from inside because of how he's built. You've got 2 speed rushers in DJ Wanham and Princely Umanmielen. It's going to create pressure, and pressure doesn't always lead to sacks, but it certainly can lead to mistakes, and I think that's what happened here. I think they feel pretty good about the film that they put out. And who else probably feels pretty good about the film? Tracy Smith.
Yeah.
It's your turn, Alex.
Yeah.
Go on a diatribe about special teams.
Well, I mean, we're both going to go on diatribes about special teams. I mean, Ryan Fitzgerald.
They listened to this show before. They know I'm going to talk.
Ryan Fitzgerald was 6 for 6, 3 point after attempts, one of which was from 48 yards because of an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, and then went 3 for 3 from field goal attempts, one of which was 57 yards, which I believe tied the second longest kick in Panthers franchise history. It was literally the perfect day. Okay, it was the perfect day minus 1 muffed punt on special teams. I don't think it could get any better. Ryan Fitzgerald.
Yeah, he could have not muffed the punt, but yes. Yeah.
No, but when it comes to the rest, I mean, you're never going to have a flawless game is kind of my point. And the fact that one flaw could have really shifted momentum and it didn't because the Falcons failed to score a touchdown and then later missed the field goal. That's about as much as you can ask for if you're the Panthers. Talked to Ryan Fitzgerald after the game. Apparently Florida State, their social media team also regularly typed his name out as Ryan Fitzpatrick, which is kind of funny because as listeners of the show know, a couple of episodes ago, I incessantly called him Ryan Fitzpatrick, which was just so annoying. But yeah, no, he had a great game. The thing that the coaching staff and honestly his teammates kept bringing up was how good he was at kickoffs. At least JJ Jansen talked about it. He's kicking those knuckleballers really well. The Panthers are utilizing the new rule, the new kickoff rule, to where, okay, if the ball lands in the landing zone, which is anywhere between the 20-yard line and the goal line, then the ball is live. Then the players can go and hopefully the ball will take a strange bounce and the coverage team will have an advantage. Ryan Fitzgerald has essentially mastered that kick. I don't know what kind of practice it is required, but he's essentially mastered that kick so much so that the Falcons, once they figured out, okay, they're going to try to put the ball on the ground and they moved up, he just flung it perfectly to the goal line to where they had to receive it at the goal line, back up, all their momentum's going back and have to charge forward after that. And that yielded a really good result for the Panthers special teams as well. That field position game is music to Dave Canales' ears. And make no mistake, it is a pretty big reason why the Falcons didn't score any points in this game. Obviously, the defense played really well. Obviously, the offense didn't make any mistakes to limit field position. But the special teams did a really good job, too. Mike, I'm sure you have a lot to talk about when it comes to, Thomas and Coombe or whoever. But Ryan Fitzgerald deserves a lot of credit for this win as well.
Absolutely. And I don't know that I mean, I didn't watch the broadcast, but it felt like, at least from social media or the press box, that people didn't really hone in on how important going for that 57-yarder was. Because at that point, the Panthers are up by 7. Their opponent has missed 2 pretty standard field goals.
Mm-hmm.
And the momentum has swung so heavily in your favor that, like, taking a risk like that, if it doesn't pay off, could have swung momentum. I thought it was the right call when he did it. I didn't think the previous 50-something yard field goal possibilities were as cut and dry as this. I mean, I would have gone for the one in Jacksonville. I would not have done it in Arizona. But like, this one felt like cut and dry. Bury these guys if you can. And I know 10-0 doesn't seem like a burying you guys, but when nothing's going right for you on special teams, it filters into the defense and the offense and all that stuff. And so they took a 10-0 lead to halftime, and there was not any point in that game I felt like they were going to lose. But the 57-yarder was what clinched it to me. Like, that was game over. Like, morale was done. If this guy can hit a 57-yarder and your fill-in kicker, who you just cut your longtime incumbent kicker for, can't even hit, like, within the 50, tough beat for you. It's done. I also think, you brought up Incoom. I thought Incoom, Tremaine,
Campbell. Dale Von Campbell.
Yeah, Dale Von Campbell, who had his first game ever, had a great play on a punt. One of the few punts the Panthers had. I just thought, like, the operation worked really, really well. Like, Caleb Evans had a stop. The new guy that they brought in from Cincinnati made a stop on the opening kickoff. Like, Tracy Smith's on a heater, man. Like, he is. Like, it's just a fact. Like, I mean, that's what it is. And what's interesting about it is he doesn't have really a ton of special teams aces. Dirty Dan Chizina is now the most, like, built for special teams guy on the practice squad right now, but, like, he didn't have that guy last week or the first 3 weeks. So I think, like, that's what's been all the more impressive. I think Sam Martin's been terrific. I think JJ Jansen's been JJ Jansen. And so I'm interested to see kind of where this group goes from here, but right now they're on a heater. And they're going to have to take that into New England and, warm up the Patriots.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one important question just really briefly, before we talk about this Patriots game week 4, what does this win tell us about the Panthers?
Nothing. It tells us nothing about the Panthers. The problem with the way the season has gone is that they've had such high variance wins and losses. There's been no in between. They haven't played a normal game. Yep. They got down to Jacksonville and spent the entire time trying to come back and just couldn't. It was a hot day, unusual heat. They just failed in all regards.
There was a weather delay.
Yeah, that was not a normal game. And then you get to Arizona and they get the roof blown off of them, and they spend the entire game trying to come back. Defense tries to mitigate the damage, whatever. This game, everything went right for them pretty much. And so I'm really interested to see, it's a good segue to New England, because I think this next stretch of games, New England, Miami at home, Dallas at home, Jets on the road, these are all, like, evenly matched sort of teams. If we can get like a 24-20 game out of a couple of these, you can then really know what this team is heading into the second half. I don't think most teams know what they are until mid-October, early November anyway. And so I think, like, as much as people want to kind of rail Dave Canales, like, in a general sense, look, I thought week 1 was terrible. Like, it was pathetically bad. I thought week 2, you saw some rhythm towards the end of the game, but it ultimately didn't matter. This game, I thought Dave's play calling and his clock management and his overall operation was terrific. And that was before they were up by 3 scores. That first half was managed very, very well. Very, very well. So if you're looking for like truffles, right? It's the defense used Trevon Merrick and Trevin Wallace extremely well. That is a good sign for the future. You know what they can do when they're used in optimal situations. Dave Canales did a very good job from an operational standpoint. We saw the three rookies on defense play and play well in Lathan Ransom, Princely Uman-Milan, and Nick Scort. But ultimately, as a whole, we can't glean a ton from this game. I think individual, like the problem with the NFL, and everyone knows I'm a baseball fan. Baseball, they play almost every single day, so there's like a new storyline every single day. The problem with the NFL is you dissect this for an entire week, and when they lose, and they lose in an embarrassing fashion, everything gets heightened. When they win, everything gets heightened. I'd like to see the defense continue suit. If they play like they did in this game, or even like, a rung lower, this team's got a shot to be a close to 500 ball club. This offense, I think they're pretty even in talent to last year. If you sub out McMillan for Thielen, it's not all that much different, right? Because you had Tommy Tremble sidelined for a while. Now you're about to have JT Sanders probably sidelined for a while. There's all these moving parts. They lose some offensive linemen, whatever. The defense, talent-wise, is exponentially better, especially on the front end. Like when Turk Warden gets back and Patrick Jones is in there and they find a healthy way to move this front seven rotation around, and Trevon Merrick is playing his like Swiss Army knife thing, I think this defense can hum from a talent perspective. It's just a matter of Evero putting them in the right spots. And I think they probably learned a lot about their individual talent as opposed to their overarching unit here. I think the special teams is probably due to regress eventually because that's special teams in general. There's going to be a lot of movement there. But if Tracy Smith can have a top 10 unit this year, again, they're going to have a shot at being close to 500 ball club. They didn't start the way that you and I thought they would. We both thought that they'd be 1-1 after week 2, but they're only 1-2 right now, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like this is a sunk cost thing. There were 10 0-2 teams after week 2. There are now 6. So 4 teams got their first wins. And they're also about to face a murder, like a who's who of whom over the next 4 weeks. So, and not to say all these teams are dog dudes, but like they're not good. Like they're not good teams. And the Panthers aren't yet either. This is a mediocre murderer's row. You know what I mean?
I would say they're not yet established yet. The teams that the Panthers are going to play. And in week 4, I think they're going to play this team that has yet to establish its identity, with a new head coach over there in Mike Vrabel and a still pretty young quarterback in Drake Maye, a quarterback that the Charlotte area knows quite well. Let me just preview this New England Patriots team, and then I'll go to you and we'll get your predictions, and then I will give my wrong prediction, as has happened thus far this year. All right. Okay. Quick things on Drake Maye. He's got a completion percentage of 72.6% on the year, which is pretty efficient. 785 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions to his name. He's also already and incredibly taken 12 sacks. So that's 4 per game, which is pretty Bryce Young rookie year level kind of numbers. And it probably would be more if he didn't have 87 rushing yards to his name, which is tied for the most on the team. Ramondre Stevenson, the team's RB1, also has 87 yards. And then rookie Travion Henderson, who the Boston area was super high about coming into the year, has 65 rushing yards to his name. The receivers on this offense aren't super high powered outside of Stephon Diggs, who most fantasy footballers know, but even he's the 4th leading receiver on the team. Stephon Diggs has 13 receptions for 112 yards. 3 other guys in front of him, tight end Hunter Henry, 13 receptions for 165 yards. Keyshawn Boot and Ramondre Stevenson's both have around there. Not a ton of firepower on this offense, honestly. And particularly when you mix in the stats and all these things. However, the sacks and all these things. But still, somehow they're in all these games outside of a -3 turnover margin. So, Mike, I just laid all that out there. How do you feel about this game coming up?
I'm a big fan of Mike Vrabel's. This is a tight end adjacent team, so I'm constantly going to be paying attention to them. Look, they're middling offensively. Like, if you really look at this beyond the individual stats, right? Like, they're 17th in total yard, or excuse me, they are, sorry, that's on defense. They're 11th in total yards, 19th in rushing yards per game, and then 8th in passing yards. I think this is really a team that goes as Drake Maye goes. And so I think from their perspective, if they can protect him and he can avoid turnovers, they feel pretty good about themselves. But they are tied for 29th in the league in sacks per pass attempt. So you can get to them. So this is going to kind of be like a mishmash affair for the Panthers, because they've got a very good run defense, not a very good pass defense, and their pass blocking is poor, and the Panthers pass rush is poor. So like, you're going to have to win on your margins that are not necessarily your go-to bread and butter stuff, right? So like, they're limiting runners to under 3 yards per carry. That's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells me that they're not fluky with it, especially considering the fact that they have lost 2 games, right? So they've lost 2 games and only given up 2.78 yards per carry. Like, that's wild to me. And it tells me that the games are relatively close that they're losing, right? Like, they lost to Pittsburgh 21-14 last week. And it seemed like it was a pretty feisty affair there. Defensively, they're allowing about 316 yards per game. Rushing wise, though, again, they're allowing 60.3 rushing yards per game. That is wild. Like, wild stuff. Again, prior to week 2, the Panthers had allowed 200 rushing yards or more in 7 consecutive games. A good game for them was 131 yards allowed. So, like, that's pretty special run defense right there. And these guys are going to be gritty. They're a Mike Vrabel team. Where they struggled, though, is against the pass. And so that's where I think this is going to have to be a Bryce Young versus Drake Maye sort of quarterback game, right? So they're allowing 256.3 yards per game. That's 29th in the league. They're averaging 8.64 yards per passing attempt. That's wild. Again, 31st in the league. So this is going to be on Bryce. I mean, this is like, they're not going to probably have like a lot of run help there. They need to figure out ways to be creative in the passing game. They need to target T-Mac McMillan as much as possible. We don't know if Leggett's going to play because he's got the hamstring injury. Bryson Tremaine as a bigger wide receiver, hopefully he's more of a red zone target. We know that Jatavian Sanders is dealing with a high ankle sprain, so it's probably going to be the Tommy Tremble show. Tommy Tremble has not had a signature game in his career. This might be the one. And I think they need to trust their tight ends in this game. As much as the Patriots tend to trust their tight ends. And so I'm interested to see how this passing game goes. I'm not terribly optimistic about this game. I do think they can come out of this stretch at 2-2 or 3-1. But the Patriots kind of have me a little nervous, because you would look at the rushing defense and you would say, well, how are they going to set up play action? How are they going to set up motion? How are they going to give Bryce Young opportunities to pass the ball? Like, you know, they're 6th in sack per pass attempt rate on defense. So they're going to bring pressure. That's going to happen. And so, you know, this is going to be a game that the defense and Bryce Young are going to have to wear. And if they can get to Drake Maye and create mistakes via turnovers and sack Drake Maye, they got a real shot here, even though it's on the road and it's in the Northeast and Bryce is coming off, a fine game. The offense is coming off a fine game. This is going to be the real test for them. And this is where we're going to learn probably what this team is. What's your overall opinion on what could go down on Sunday?
So you didn't give a prediction of whether, and I guess I'll give mine right now. I largely agree with you in this matchup weirdness. I'm going to pick the Patriots winning 21-17 if I have to give a score to it. They had 5 turnovers last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, 2 of which came in the red zone. They are better than their opponents in pretty much every single team stat that includes third down complete conversion percentage. They're 44%, which is pretty good. Their opponents are 40%. They're 6 of 7 on fourth downs somehow. They have more total offensive yards than their opponents, more total rushing yards than their opponents, obviously, which goes to your point about their rushing defense is really good. The only thing that they're not good at is playing mistake-free football. They are -3 in the turnover battle. You can't have 5 turnovers, 2 of which in the red zone, and expect to win. But they still kind of did expect to win. They only lost 21-14 against an Aaron Rodgers-led Pittsburgh Steelers. So it's I think that this team is looking at this Panthers game and be like, this is where all we have to do is just play mistake-free and we're going to be good. And when you play like that, that's a recipe for success. So I think the Patriots are going to win. And the Panthers are going to fall to 1-3. I think it's going to be a close game. But of course, take that with a grain of salt. I just don't really see how. I mean, I do see how the Panthers win, but if the Patriots course correct, they do have the potential to be a pretty decent team.
So here's the thing. As you said that, I'm kind of marinating on it. So
I convinced you otherwise?
No, I'm going to take the Panthers 20-19, and here's why. I think the Patriots are going to have more scoring drives. I think they're going to have a tougher time in the red zone than you would think. I also think, you look at the Panthers, they have 4 interceptions in their first 3 games. Last year, they had 9 and 17. I think they have put an emphasis on turning the ball over. I just kind of feel like Drake Maye is he's the opposite of Penix. He is not a guy who's going to crawl up in his shell and make poor decisions. He's going to take sacks, which could lead to, some opportunities for forced fumbles. And I think, this is a scrappy team, and scrappy teams make mistakes. And so if they can figure out a way to get the Patriots to beat themselves, I'm feeling really confident in Ryan Fitzgerald. I think Ryan Fitzgerald is going to come up big in this game. And look, I don't think Bryce is going to be set up to have a huge game, but I think he's going to do enough. And if they can win this game, a close game, they will realize who they are. And since you picked the Patriots, I absolutely cannot pick them. That's not just for radio. That's literally for our standings. I can't let Scott take a massive lead before we hit the bye. Look, I think you can.
We got to get Scott on the record earlier.
Yeah. Well, so
we got to get Scott on the record earlier.
Yeah. No, I know, but I think this team has an opportunity here in these next 4 games. I'm not saying they have to go 4-0, but if they can go 2-2 in these next couple of games, that would put them at 3-4. And that is a much better standing and spot to be in the first, entering week 8 that they've been in since I've been here. And we said all summer they were going to be able to compete past, October 1 and into the trade deadline. And I think that would put them there. So I'm going to say they get off to a good start here and they steal one from New England with the Ryan Fitzgerald field goal. I'm going to call it a 48-yarder. The kick that he missed twice at FanFest to win it.
Sounds good. Anything else, Mike? Or are we good to go?
We are great to go, some would say.
Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all of your Panthers needs. Mike, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
I'll try. That's a wrap.